What works to reduce rhino poaching and how much does it cost? My name is Tim Kuiper. I'm a senior lecturer at Nelson Mandela University at the George campus. I'm sitting here in front of the beautiful forest on our campus. And I want to tell you about a recent study that we conducted to answer just that question. What works to reduce rhino poaching and how much does it cost? This is certainly not my project. It involved a wide collaboration between the University of Cape Town, the Greater Kruger Ecosystem Protection Foundation, Stellenbosch University, Nelson Mandela University, and the University of Oxford. It was a science management collaboration to try and answer the question, what works to reduce rhino poaching and how much does it cost? The study focused on the Greater Kruger area in South Africa. Kruger National Park had a rhino population of around 12,000 back in 2012. Today we're sitting at around probably below 2,000. So there's been a drastic decline in the rhino population in the Greater Kruger National Park and the surrounding private reserves. The stakeholders in the landscape got together to ask the question, why have rhinos declined so rapidly and what can we do about it? And have the things we've been doing been working or not, and why? It was a mammoth effort, particularly led by the Greater Kruger Environmental Protection Foundation, who oversees work of all the different reserves in the landscape. They gathered data from 2017 to 2023, so 7 years of data on rhino poaching levels, as well as the various things that were done to try and stop rhino poaching. So tracking dogs, air support, helicopters, aeroplanes, detection cameras equipped with artificial intelligence, anti-poaching patrols, rapid response teams, a whole suite of anti-poaching interventions. And then there were the more alternative approaches, one being dehorning. So dehorning means removing the rhino's horn intentionally. So the management of the reserves remove the rhino's horn in order to make the rhino less attractive to poachers. So that was one intervention that was analyzed alongside things like detection dogs and cameras. And what we found across 7 years and 11 different reserves, including one reserve in Mozambique, was that dehorning was the single most effective intervention. Wherever it was implemented, it resulted in a drastic decline in poaching. Statistically speaking, we had 8 different sites, so 8 replicates, and we were able to isolate these massive reductions in poaching and link them to the dehorning of rhinos, wide-scale dehorning of rhinos. What we did find with these other interventions is that they did lead to many arrests of poachers. So tracking dogs, cameras, air support, anti-poaching patrols successfully achieved over 700 poacher arrests in this landscape over those 7 years. But we failed to find evidence that those arrests translated into less future poaching. So on one level, these interventions were successful, but they did not result in the same level of reduction in poaching as dehorning did. Now, there's some key reasons why we think this is the case. One is that corruption, so internal involvement of reserve staff with the criminal syndicates who are driving poaching, means that these syndicates and the poachers can get around the interventions because they have information on where the rangers are going to be, where the rhinos are, where the cameras are, where the dogs are. That dampens the effectiveness of those interventions. But secondly, that region suffers from a great deal of socioeconomic inequality. There's poverty, there's poor government service delivery in those towns next to Kruger National Park. And what this means is that even though poaching poses a high risk to the poacher, it seems that there's a large pool of motivated offenders willing to take that risk. And the criminal syndicates take advantage of these community members, for example, by offering them loans, and then when they can't pay back the loan, they say, well, here's a gun. Help me with this rhino poaching operation. It's not as simple as that often, but these criminal syndicates take advantage of the socioeconomic vulnerability of both rangers and others in order to get that internal information. But also, there's situations of multiple repeat offenders, so even arresting poachers, people who've been arrested have been let out on bail and they've gone out to poach again. So the criminal justice system, the internal corruption, the socioeconomic inequality are these massive system-level drivers that dampen the effectiveness of these security and technology interventions. And in the worst case, these interventions also may isolate the people living around these reserves in terms of their involvement in conservation. So dehorning resulted in a much more drastic decline in poaching. It focused rather than on increasing the risks for poachers, reducing the potential reward. And there's a lot of work in behavioral economics in other fields, even in the policing literature, that suggests just arresting more and more people does not necessarily reduce crime. Something like dehorning involves reducing opportunities for crime. The last thing to say about this study is just to caution against seeing dehorning as a silver bullet. We did document over 100 dehorned rhinos being poached. The horn regrows. So in many of these cases, the horn had regrown quite a lot, and then the rhino was poached. So this points to the need for regular dehorning, but also points to the fact that syndicates are adapting, and they seem still to be willing to poach a rhino, even if there's only 5 to 10 centimeters of horn left on the rhino. So dehorning is not a silver bullet, but of all the interventions we analyzed, it led to drastic reductions in poaching, and it's been implemented now at South Africa's second largest rhino population in Mfolozi Park in KwaZulu-Natal. There too, drastic reductions in poaching were observed after dehorning. But there is also evidence there that poachers are still willing to poach rhinos for those stumps. So we need to look at wider systematic solutions, addressing poverty, addressing socioeconomic inequality, addressing demand for rhino horn in consumer states. It's a multifaceted approach that we need. But we're really excited about this study because it involved massive effort from the managers of reserves, South African national parks, University of Oxford support, Nelson Mandela University, the University of Cape Town, the University of Stellenbosch, local NGOs in the area, WWF was involved. Massive effort. The Rhino Recovery Fund from the Rhino Wildlife Conservation Network providing funding for the project. It was a joy to be part of this team and to learn from people on the ground, as the statistician, as the scientist, what we can do about rhino poaching. It was very much a joint effort, and I'd encourage you to look in more depth at our results. We're very excited. It's published in the journal Science, one of the top scientific journals in the world, and we hope you will enjoy reading more about the work and